What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today what I want to talk about is why a jerkbait is starting to play so much during the spawn. When it's seemingly a time that we're supposed to be flipping and throwing slow moving baits, a jerkbait seems to be absolutely taking over the industry right now, and I want to break down exactly why that is, and at the end of the video I'll break down some of the gear and some of my favorite baits that I really like to throw. So stick around, you guys are not going to want to miss this video. So it seems like in every tournament nowadays, a jerkbait, even during the spawn, is absolutely dominating. We saw it at Toledo Bend, we just saw it at the Classic. You know, when shallow water guys predominantly were taking over throwing chatterbaits, spinnerbaits, flipping, throwing a jig, it's now dominated by a jerkbait. Why is that? Well, a lot of us get sucked into the spawn as far as the males pushing up. So how the spawn typically works is buck bass, or the males, the smaller of the two, will go shallow first. There will be a big push of them, and they will be all over. And they're feeding, they're making beds, we see them, and then a few females will be up there, you know, one here and there, and we get sucked into that. Well, what actually happens when females go shallow is they're only shallow for like 24 to 36 hours. Because females are the bigger of the two, right? We all know that. And if you didn't, females are substantially larger than males. If you catch a fish over 4 pounds, it's a female. And so they have all the eggs, and they have the important stuff in the reproductive process, which is why they're only up there for so short of a time period, and which is why they're the last to go up there. And so what they often do is they stay just off the bank, and they have to figure out which males they want to spawn with. And so they're staying just out of eyesight, cruising the banks, looking for the right males, you know, the best suited males of the species in order to lay their eggs on their bed. And oftentimes, females will not lay all of their eggs in one bed. They will actually lay a certain portion of their eggs in one bed, and then more in another bed, and more in another bed, because what that does is it gives their eggs a better chance that they find a suitable male. You know, it gives them a better chance that their eggs will survive. And so, what people are doing nowadays is they're staying just off the bank and utilizing their forward-facing sonar and looking for those individual big females. So, instead of the typical pattern where we go shallow, catch some males, maybe luck into one, maybe two big females, these guys are staying off the bank and looking for just those big females. And the predominant bait that they like to use is a Damiki rig, but more importantly, a jerkbait. Because that jerkbait, when those fish have not really seen a whole lot of baits because they're suspended off the shore, is just a really good way to trigger those fish, because they're kind of in that I'm looking for a male partner mood, not necessarily a feeding mood. So the jerkbait is what's really going to trigger them. A lot of times they'll pair in a Nico rig with that, if the female's being predominantly stubborn, sitting on a specific piece of cover, etc. But the real key to this, when throwing a jerkbait, is knowing where to look. So if you get on a shallow flat, those females have a lot of area to roam, right? And so it'd be really hard to try to find them. The key is to look in pockets that are steeper. If you look in an area that has steeper banks, or go to the steeper bank in the pocket, a lot of times those females are going to stick out like a sore thumb, because they're going to be along that bank somewhere just out of eyesight, of normal eyesight, and so they're going to stick out off the bank a little bit and be a lot easier to see. This is what you saw guys doing on Toledo Bend. This is what you saw guys doing on, or not Toledo Bend, this is what you saw guys doing on Lake Fork predominantly. They were getting in these pockets, these fish were staging in that timber just off the bank, and that's how they were catching those really big females, because those females, a lot of them weren't shallow. They had a cold front that pushed them off, and so they didn't want to be super shallow. So all those big females are up there. Because even though a female will sit on a bed for 24 to 36 hours, she is going to be shallow a lot longer than that, in that 10 foot or less range, right? She's going to be up there, not necessarily on a bed, but just up there in general, looking for a bed, being in the general vicinity. And so those females are there, but a lot of times we just don't get the chance to see them or have the opportunity to cast at them without, you know, forward-facing sonar, because there's just one of them out there cruising. They're not potted up like the males are up shallow on the flats. They're in a hard-to-reach area, and so that's why a jerkbait and forward-facing sonar play immensely during this time period. So let's kind of get into some of my favorite jerkbaits, some of my favorite gear that I really like to throw this stuff on. The key is going to be the jerkbaits that you throw. I like a 6 cents provoke, specifically because they make it in a few different options that you're not going to find anywhere else. They have the typical shallow silent and the shallow rattling, which is super awesome, because that silent bait, when it gets slick calm, those fish have been pressured a lot, that silent bait really helps me get more bites. The key is they also make a silent in a 106 DD. which is a little bit deeper diving jerkbait, which no other company does. So now you have a silent deep diver that you can really get a good chance at those pressured fish that are even deeper. And so it just gives me a lot of options. They have some really great color options that go with it. Another jerkbait that's extremely well is a Megabass Vision 110, right? I got to give my buddy Chris Rosella a shout out. It's a bait that is timeless, right? No matter where you go, people are always catching fish on a Megabass Vision 110 because they have some of the best colors in the industry, right? They have some of the best colors in the industry. Their bait is super non-intrusive is the best way to put it. It has great action, great cutting action. It's not super loud like a Provoke is, and so you just get the best of both worlds with that. And so you put that in your hand and you're going to catch fish. The line size, typically if I'm fishing shallow, I like to run 15, because what that 15 pound is going to do is it's going to keep that bait up a little bit higher, and it's going to slow it down, so I'm not going to necessarily have to slow it down with a jerk bait as much. I can actually use that line. And one big thing that I want to talk about is the hooks that you're throwing, because when you're fishing around giant fish, what you're going to have is you're going to have fish that pull really hard, right? And what people don't think about is when you're catching smaller fish, you don't have to worry about the thickness of their jawbone. Okay, bigger fish have a thicker jawbone, and so a lot of times you have to run bigger hooks to be able to get on that gap to compensate for the thickness of that jawbone, not getting through it, but getting around it. Because of how wide it is, a lot of times smaller hooks don't have the gap between the treble hook and the bend to really get around that jawbone to hook those fish. And so I like a Provoke for the specific reason that it comes with triple grips. You know, they do a really good job when you get them in the corner of the mouth or on the outside of the mouth. When you hook them, you're going to land them. But I will, a lot of times, take out the middle treble hook and put 2 4s on instead of 3 6s. That's super important, because 2 4s are going to give you a lot more gap, and it's going to allow you to have a lot better hookup ratio when those big fish are just nipping at it. If they're choking it, by all means, those triple grips are a great option. Now, one thing that I do want to talk about is the gear that I throw it on, because that's kind of really important. A lot of people like to go to a really soft rod when they're throwing a jerkbait, but I kind of like a rod that has a fast tip but a soft bend. That's what I like, because what that does is that gets a good reaction out of that jerkbait, but then it also allows you to load up on it. But a softer rod is also still good if that's what you have, because now with forward-facing sonar you can watch your jerkbait more and try to see the reaction of that fish, so you don't necessarily have to get all of the action out of the jerkbait. You can watch the fish and try to manipulate your jerkbait in order to get that fish to bite. The rod that I throw is just an arc reinforcer. It's a 6/8. I like a shorter jerkbait rod just because I'm a short guy. You know, I really don't think anybody should be throwing, when they're looking at forward-facing sonar, throwing a jerkbait longer than a 7-foot rod. If you're in open water just casting, 7/6 is a great option because you can bomb it, but for this specific instance, I like a shorter rod. Now, a reinforcer is really expensive, I will give you that, and so I'll have some budget-friendly options listed down below, so that way you guys can still get a good jerkbait rod but not break the bank. The key that I want to talk about is my reel. I use an Arc G5, not a super expensive reel, but it's an 8-to-1 gear ratio reel. That is super important, because a lot of times when these fish eat the jerkbait, when they react, they come at you or they come up really fast. And so that 8-to-1 gear ratio reel allows me to catch up to those fish really fast when they do eat it and really get a good hook set. Another key to that is when I'm jerking a jerkbait, an 8-to-1 allows me to pick up the slack faster so I can work that jerkbait faster and keep it moving faster. So that's super important for me. It's one of my absolute favorite things that I like with a jerk. Is there anything else I want to talk about a jerkbait? I think that's fairly well it. So hopefully that helps you guys when you're out there understanding why a jerkbait is playing so much right now, because it's just a better way to target some of those bigger females off the bank. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like the content and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button to follow along. But God bless every single one of you guys. I apologize, my voice is super hoarse right now from the classic. But, you know, I hope to see every single one of you guys in the next video.